No mai hoki mai ki te roa tuatahi o te wānanga tuatoru o Crazy and Ambitious me Kaurilands Summit. Welcome back to day one, session 2 of the Bioheritage Crazy and Ambitious 3 conference, which features the Kaurilands Summit. My name's Andrea. I'm going to introduce myself more in a minute, but first of all, I'm going to hand to Valance Smith of Ngāpuhi, Waikato, Ngāti Haina and Ngāti Pākehā descent to open our session 2 today. Kia ora, Valance.
Tēnā koe, Andrea. Kia kare ki a tātou. Ka tākene te kawa, ko te kawa nui, ko te kawa roa, ko te kawa whakatiki, ko te kawa iahi mai no tiki o te rangi. I tiwa ko te pū, ko te wau, ko te rito, ko te take, ko te pūkenga, ko te wānanga, ko te taura, ko te tauira. Tēnei rā te awhenu, ko te awherangi, no te ori o mo te upui te taketake o enuki o e rangi. Tēnei kohoho, ki runga ki te tipua, ki runga ki te tawhito, ki runga ki te kāhunga atua ki a puta tātou i te whaio, ki te ao marama uhi, wero tau mai te mauri hau mie hui e, tai ki e.
Kia ora, Valance. No mai anō koutou. Nā mihi nui ki a koutou. Ko mauka tere te maunga, te ru nei taku ngākau, ko rakahuri te awa nei aku māharahara. Kei te mahi a hau, hei kai tohu motuhaki mō ngā mea o te tai ao. Ka noho au he tangata tiriti mō ake tonu atu. E noho ana au ki Waitaha, inainei, ko Andrea tokoinga. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So kia ora, everybody. My name is Andrea. My research background is on animal pests and their impacts on native flora and fauna in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I'm also a former co-director of this National Science Challenge. Ahi ahi Marie, whānau, welcome to everyone who's online this afternoon. Between these two wānanga, the Kaurilands Summit and the Crazy and Ambitious 3, the aim is to showcase the latest tiriti-led biodiversity and biosecurity research from around Aotearoa. So please sit back, relax, and join me and our wonderful chair, Simon, who I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment, and all the speakers on this journey through session 2 this afternoon with the vision Māori ora, ngā koe ora tuku iho, our biological heritage is thriving. Just before I do introduce Simon, our chair for this through a few housekeeping notes. First of all, if you've got any technical issues, please use the live support. It's there for your use, so you can access that on the right-hand side or from the foyer screen if you're outside of the sessions. The team here are really great, so speaking from experience. If you do have any viewing issues, for example, internet bandwidth with issues like I do, choose the audio/video text located right below the video and choose one of the backup streams, and which have a lower latency. And then the virtual platform allows opportunities for you to connect with other attendees. So we encourage you to explore using the meeting hub and the exhibition stands during the break times. Please do make use of those functions. They are really important for the networking during online events. You probably will have noticed that there are some fantastic prizes up for grabs. So click the win points button if you want to get involved in that. Get in amongst it. There are some great prizes. You will have seen online what the prizes are. Go online to the conference website and check them out if you haven't already. And then finally, and most importantly, please get into the Q&A session as soon as you want to when you're hearing the speakers speak. There is a wee bit of a lag in the questions coming through, so the sooner you drop a question into that Q&A function, the better. And we'll aim to get the panel or presenters to answer them if we can. Just to be clear, the platform and technical questions go to the live support, and then the Q&A and the discussion forum is for us as the conference community to engage with each other. I'm going to turn our focus now to the theme for this first session, which is woven around the Oranga theme in Ngā Rakau Taketake, which is the Myrtle Rust and Kauri Dieback Strategic Science Fund. Let me introduce our session chair, Simon Palmer. Simon is a researcher. He's based at Kaupapa Māori School of Māori Studies at Te Herenga Waka University, at the University of Wellington. He works as part of the Novel Tools and Strategies theme in the challenge. He also co-leads Ngā Pikarere, the early career network for the challenge. You may have heard and seen him earlier online with a fantastic presentation, and we're going to come back to Simon in a little while. But first of all, without further ado, it's an honour to introduce Dr. Daniel Hikuroa for the keynote presentation for this session. Dan is of Ngāti Maniapoto, Waikato Tainui and Ngāti Whanaunga descent. He employs earth systems and environmental humanities approaches in his work at Waipapa Taumata Row, University of Auckland. He plays some key roles within New Zealand's science and research sector and also advising public sector government agencies. His mahi is all around weaving Indigenous knowledge and epistemologies with science and into legislation as well, thinking about assessment frameworks and decision support tools. I'll now hand over to Dan with a pre-recorded presentation. We will come back to questions at the end if Dan is able to join us online, but then if not, Simon will pick up and chair the remainder of this session. So no mai, Dan.
Kia ora tātou. Ka mihi ahau ki ngā kaiwhakarite o Crazy Ambitious 3, mauri ora ngā kōrero tuku iho. E hia ana, ahau ki te mihi atu ki ngā rangatira ko kōrero ake nei. Me era atu o ngā kai kōrero, koutou katoa e whakarongo mai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Today I'll present some key Māori ideas and practices that align with the vision of reversing the decline of our biological heritage. I build it around three key concepts: Taonga, Tikanga, and Turuapo. But first, ko waitomo te awa, ko ōwhawhi te maunga, ko toki kapu te marae, ko Ngāti uekaha te hapū, ko Ngāti Maniapoto te iwi, ko Tainui me te Arawa ngā waka, ko au e uri o hoturoa, tamate kapua me tia, ko Dan Hikuroa, toko ingoa. In a Māori worldview, we exist in a whakapapa, kinship-based relationship with the tai ao, the earth, universe, and everything in it. Within this framing, waterways, mountains, animals and plants can be ancestors. This pepeha does more than identify me. It details my existence and well-being as inextricably interlocked with the well-being of te tai ao, the environment. Waitomo is the river, meaning I am the river and the river is me. Ōwhawhi is the mountain. I am the mountain and the mountain is me, and so on. Notably, although I have agency, I am the least important of all those I mentioned. All are more important than I. And there is a whakatauki, or a proverb, toi tū te whenua, whatu ngaro he tangata. Literally, the land endures and people are fleeting. It means that I only exist because all of those other things existed before me, and they will exist beyond me. The iwi and hapū will live on, ōwhawhi, waitomo, toki kapu will remain. So pepeha are small fragments of the whakapapa of an individual, part of a generative framework of whakapapa of all that has existed. Oh, excuse me. Mātauranga Māori spans Māori knowledge, culture, values and worldview. A continuum of distinct knowledge with Polynesian orange that grew in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and further developed here along with cultural and epistemological identities of Hapū and Iwi Māori. Mātauranga Māori is rooted here and encompasses a rich and deep understanding of Aotearoa New Zealand ecosystems, as well as actions intended to maintain balance, manifest of practices of interacting with other living and more than living things as part of the environment. Mātauranga Māori, te reo Māori and whakapapa are used together to codify the perspective and understand what an ecosystem is, how it works, and its components and functional units. All of this will be critical as we seek to reverse the decline of our biological heritage. As Māori was not a written knowledge or language, much Mātauranga Māori occurs in the spoken form, including whakapapa, or tia, pūrākau, and ori, to name a few. Additionally, Mātauranga Māori was manifest in many other ways, including as maramataka, the stellar lunar ecological calendar and guide, and the design and construction materials, construction techniques, and site selection for wharenui, for marae, and hikaahi, and fire making, and rongoa, medicinal practices. In these ways, mātauranga was caught as much as it was taught. And when it comes to knowing, being and doing, our worldview is fundamental. And so we all possess a worldview. The dominant worldview in Aotearoa New Zealand is so pervasive, it's almost invisible. The Reverend Māori Marsden, a highly respected tōhunga, describes worldview thus. The key points to bring out of this are that our worldview determines what we believe as individuals to be real, what we believe to be impossible even. And it's that aspect which forms the central component of our value systems and how we do, in everything we do and why we do it. This image is a depiction of Mātauranga Māori from within that Māori worldview. A marae, constructed in a certain place from certain materials, and encapsulates Mātauranga Māori in more than the written form. So what does a different worldview look like? Remember when the world was flat? We may laugh about that now, but that used to be real. New observations have led to new realities. The world, of course, is now a sphere. Here's another example. This is a humpback whale. Its scientific name is Megaptera novangliae, large-winged New Englander. Large-winged on account of its large pectoral fins, being larger than its cousins in the whale family. And New Englander, as it was the first described, at least in a formal scientific way, on populations based in the coastal waters of New England. Some common Māori names for whale include Ikamoana, Tohora, and Parawa. Both of these ways of knowing, relating to, and making sense of the whale, or tohora, reflect different worldviews. For some Māori, there is a specific name for this whale, Pākehā. And for them, Pākehā is also an eponymous ancestor. Pākehā the ancestor rode a humpback whale, a Pākehā, to Aotearoa New Zealand. Similarly, for some, the tohora is the southern right whale, and Parawa is the sperm whale. Now, a key point to make here is that a Mātauranga Māori approach accepts multiple versions to describe something, a whale, a maunga, a lizard. It does not seek to determine which version is right and which is wrong. And if you have ever found yourself saying or thinking, I couldn't believe my eyes, chances are it's because what you're seeing does not equate with what you believe to be real or possible. The power of your worldview is so strong it can cause you to doubt your eyes. I had a recent experience of this phenomenon. I was leading a field trip and we were staying in a lodge on Ruapehu. One evening the sky was clear and I suggested we go and observe the night sky, where I urged the students to look for constellations they knew and satellites. I told them they would recognise the latter as they looked just like stars, same size, colour, shape, but they moved slowly across the sky. Some eager students had rushed ahead and started calling out excitedly, saying, I see one, and another, and another, and another. And I recall thinking it was unusual to see so many at once, but I was not prepared for what I saw. 24 satellites all in a row, travelling on the same flight path, same speed as a group. In all my years of searching for satellites, never had I seen anything like that. And I can tell you that for a few seconds, I could not believe my eyes. Now, of course, my eyes were fine. They were seeing perfectly and recording perfectly what was up in the night sky. It was just my worldview that needed updating. A quick internet search revealed, of course, that they were a chain of Starlink satellites. The point being here is that our worldview is powerful and it can operate consciously or subconsciously. Now, recognizing that we all have one and that others have one that may be the same or similar or very different is a key step to beginning to understand Mātauranga Māori and hence Māori ways of knowing, epistemologies, of being, ontologies, and doing, axiologies. Here's another example. Now, hopefully, if the theories of learning are correct, I'm thinking that at least some of you will have immediately seen this and thought I'd made a mistake, that I'd inverted the map of New Zealand. Then, I hope you saw that the text was the right way up. So you began to think, perhaps that was intentional. And that got you intrigued. This is a natural alignment for a worldview that sees the North Island as Te Ika a Māui, with the head at the top. It is clearly the same thing. The pattern recognition in our brains is so good, it told you that straight away. It just also told you that it was up the wrong way. And it was only the wrong way because it's oriented differently to what you're accustomed to seeing. The usual alignment reflects the dominant worldview. It's the same thing, but we're viewing it and relating to it and making sense of it differently. In Te Ao Māori, people are simply one element in the relational networks known as whakapapa, linked with all other life forms through their shared descent from earth and sky. Humans exist in a kinship-based relationship with the Tainui, the earth, the universe, everything within it. And whakapapa is the central principle that orders Te Tainui, everything on earth and in the sky. A relational schema wherein we see ourselves as direct descendants of our Earth Mother and Sky Father, and consequently not only of the land, but as the land. I need to acknowledge that was Linda Tahu that said that. People, sky, rivers, animals, and ancestors overlap in Māori language, and Māori relational thinking views biological heritage as complex and emergent networks of plants and animals, land, water, and people in a dynamic process of coevolution. So just as the Linnaean system is a way to describe the world, whakapapa is a way to explain and make the sense of the world based on observations of the taiao within a Māori worldview. So, in another example, Kauri, the tree, is linked with whales. It's tohora for some and parawa for others. Commonly, they are brothers, the two offspring of Tani Mahuta, the deity of the forests. Tohora, or parawa, decides to live in the ocean. After failing to persuade Kauri to join him in the ocean, Tohora, or parawa, suggests they swap skins, and Kauri agrees. Now, this is the reason why Kauri's skin is so thin and is as full of resin as whale is of oil, or why the Kauri skin oozes resin like mimiha, ambergris. A key point to make here is that although there is a clear distinction between what in a Linnaean system would be an animal, the tohora, or the parawa, and a plant, Kauri, there is nonetheless a whakapapa link between them, in the Māori view. Thus, it is the relationship between animals and plants that is key. This is important to bear in mind when considering how we reverse the decline of our biological heritage. One way in which we might think about the impacts, and therefore how we can work to reverse them, is by thinking in terms of mauri, a prominent concept in Māori thinking, referring to the life force of an entity. It is the attraction or the binding force between the physical and the spiritual, and is the vital essence in the web of connections that sustains life. Without this attraction, living things die, and inanimate entities, like soil and water, lose their ability to support life. It thus follows that mauri is important to protect, because without mauri, there is no life. There is no biological heritage. Therefore, a decline of our biological heritage is also a decline in mauri. Now, one of the aims of kaitiakitanga is conceptualized as restoring or revitalizing mauri. Kaitiakitanga is the ethics and practices of managing our relationships with the taiao, the environment of which we are part of and upon which we depend, derived from the guiding principles of maintaining intergenerational balance between the needs of people and those of the taiao. It is an obligation to maintain the lands, forests, waters, and their inhabitants, to which Māori whakapapa too, and to which we are intrinsically joined. In a practical sense, Māori of course caught and ate fish, birds and other animals, harvested wild and tended other crops, plants and gardens. These activities were undertaken within a user privileges framing, not an ownership model. And as soon as the privileges were exercised, there came with it consequent responsibilities. So mauri was a key consideration when it came to making decisions about working with anything, animals and plants included. In conservation work, much focus has been on keystone species, those with disproportionately large effect relative to their abundance, or key indicators of ecological health, whose absence indicate poor health, e.g. torrent fish or our endemic Lao-palmwood frogs. I have often heard Taonga species used in discussions of keystone species and ecological health indicators as a synonym for them both. If the similarity being drawn was important, then it would be correct. However, I often hear Taonga species being used interchangeably for keystone species and or ecological health indicators, and I believe this is an incorrect use. A species is considered a taonga based on the relationship people have with it and the value they place on it. Accordingly, although taonga species can be keystone species, say tui and their fertilizer-coated seed dispersal or ecological health indicators, the criteria for being taonga is how valued the species is. Tuna are a taonga for my people in Waitomo, but are not necessarily good indicators of ecological health or water quality because they're able to withstand very poor water quality. And in another example, we have taro in our marakai at Waipapa Taumatarau, University of Auckland, adjacent to Tainui Arangi, our wharenui on Waipapa Marae. We consider this taro a taonga because it comes from the genetic stock from the garden that was established by Whakaotirangi, wife of Hoturoa, captain of the Tainui waka at Aotea Harbour on the west coast. Although there is some overlap, in general, taonga species can vary markedly between iwi. And tikanga. Tikanga Māori has become a very common term in our world today, but understandings of what it means vary considerably. Simply put, they are a Māori way of doing things, spanning correct procedure, custom, habit, law, method, manner, rule, way, code or meeting, practice or a convention or a protocol, and are the customary system of values and practices that have developed over time and are deeply embedded in the social context. Tikanga derives from the root word tika, meaning to be right. And thus tikanga focuses on the correct way of doing something, deals with right and wrong from a Māori worldview, which is of course firmly embedded in Mātauranga Māori. Tikanga are acknowledged as Māori customary law, as a means of social control, the Māori ethic, a normative system, both principled and pragmatic. Tikanga also encompass the reason, the motive, the intent, the purpose for doing something, focusing as much on the reason as well as the things we do. Although tikanga can be prescriptive, they are always values-based. Hence, whatever might be prescribed is intended to uphold values. There can also be variability in how tikanga are practiced, but with the same intent to uphold the values to do the right thing. Hence, when we practice tikanga, we do so because we want to do the right thing, not because of a fear of breaking rules or being caught. So, to sum up, governments and scientific institutions worldwide are recognising that Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing have much to offer and should play an important role in efforts to reverse the decline of biological heritage. Mātauranga Māori is New Zealand's knowledge, belief, practice complex, comprising, in addition to knowledge, Māori culture, values, practices and worldviews. A key component of Mātauranga are tikanga, the customs, traditions and practices handed down through the passages of time. To help realise the vision, Mauri ora ngā koiora tuku iho, we can explore and draw from ancestral ways of knowing, being and doing, tikanga, as we seek to ensure our taonga, ngā koiora, thrive. Nō reira, kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora anō koutou. I understand that Daniel is not online to answer questions for us today, which is a bit of a shame. However, I'm now going to hand over to Simon to chair the remainder of this session and introduce the research project. Kia ora, Simon.
Tēnā tātou, thank you for that, Andrea, and thank you to our Taketake of Valance earlier, and also to Dan for that awesome presentation. Moving onwards, I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce Oranga. Oranga is a suite of Kaupapa Māori projects that aim to restore the collective health of trees, forests and people by connecting to and resourcing Māori communities and their environmental knowledge holders to explore solutions embedded in Mātauranga Māori. These projects are unashamedly Indigenous and show how Mātauranga-led research can contribute to contemporary biosecurity issues while addressing the aspirations of Māori and their communities.
It's a real passion of mine to see that you know, our knowledge is afforded the respect. Science is great, but it's, I think, taken on a role and to a point where there are numerous examples of where science has belittled and to whakaiti other forms of knowing, other forms of knowledge. And I think across the world, Indigenous cultures have suffered similar sorts of fates at the hands of the colonisers. But here in Aotearoa, you know, we have, early on, we have, you know, a whole range of actions and activities that have occurred as a part of that colonisation process, which have been to really, to whakaiti and to try and remove our knowledge. The Taonga Suppression Act, where, you know, all of that knowledge was actually seen and it was outlawed from being used, and of course it went underground, a lot of it went underground, but I think that, along with a whole range of other processes, have worked to erode the knowledge, the strength, the vibrancy, the resilience of our knowledge bases. That's worked to erode that over time.
Ahiuria haunoroto ngai o ngā tō rongo mai wahine, Ngāti Kahungunu me Ngāti Rakau, ko James Ataria taku ingoa, and I'm a member, or co-lead actually, with Maniapoto Ashby of Te Whakawara a Ngā Kauri, the research program, which is part of the Oranga series of research programs. There's 3 members in this research team primarily. There are also other people involved, but the 3 key members are Maniapoto, Jason Cooper, and myself. And I guess my specific role in this project is to really enable and assist Maniapoto to undertake the research and the mahi that he does in the rongoa space, and obviously the application of his mātauranga to this particular kaupapa, which is around Te Whakawara a Ngā Kauri, which is to look at how we might combat against the pathogen which is affecting our kauri trees. Its purpose is quite simple, and it is about restoring the well-being of the kauri.
I te kauri haerere runga te whenua, ai te tohora i haerere i runga te matata whenua i te rawa, tuakana teina ki te kauri. Nā i roto tēnā, ka timata te māui wa tātou Rakau te kauri, ka mātou mākua tari te tohora ki te kauri. E mohena tātou ngā kōrero kei muri. Ne? E ta haere ngā tohora ki te tiro haere, ka haere i roto te moana hikoe, ka kitea te tahi wāhi pai mona. Ka hoki mai ki te mātu kia kauri haere mai, haere tāu. Ka mātu tohora, kauri kia tohora nā kohore ke te noho mai. Ka mātu tohora nā mani taku koti. Ka hupuke ngā tana koti ki runga te kauri. Nā ka titiro tātou te koti o te kauri, me te koti o te tohora, ori te ano, ne? Ori te ano. Nā koe tēne te mea I mea kau, ai ni pēr ke te rongo kei roto rā I te tohora, me taria tātou māku e tari. Ka inua tau ki waku whanaunga roto o Ngāti wai, ke tuku mai wa tahi whewua tohora, nā ka tuku ngā mai, nā me wa tahi hinu, nā I reira ka tima tātaku mahi ki te mahi hakahora a kauri, ni. A koa rakau te ngā kauri mate nei ki roto I a mātu, tēnei rohe o mātu roto o Ngāti hine. E ora tonu ana, rakau no pā mei tēnā mate kei roto I a tātu. Koe tēnei te mea tēnā, ko tai ki te wā, ke korosisi ngā wa koutou whenua i te tahi atu rongo, ke kore e pātene mate ki runga wā tātua no kauri. Nā i tēnei wā kei te putake au ki wahotu ki wā tātou iwi ke wahoahoke, ki wā tātou hapu ki te inui, mena tāe hau ki te mahi tahi ki a rātou, e pāna ki tēnei mahi o te kauri, te hako orata tātou kauri. Nā koia.
There are other rongoa practitioners who are involved, obviously which are within Tohe's close circles. Again, we have Matu Hore Parata, because of the fact that we have, it's the tōra, the connection between the tōra, the brawa and the kauri. So again, Matu Hore is a big part of this mahi. But again, when you expand that circle a bit further, it's taking on board, the other members and parts of the Oranga program, which I said is a collection of mātauranga Māori, Kaupapa Māori based research initiatives that are going on. So there's connections there, and we have a very obvious connection with, we call it RA2, which is really looking at the notion of irangaranga, vibrational frequencies, things like karakia, the notion of how karakia are used and delivered in a particular way in order to be a part of the rongoa, the healing process. To call it, when you say call it a research area, it's research is about undertaking a process of discovering, of usually discovering new things. I think where this might be slightly different is that we're not so much discovering new things, we're actually applying this corpus of knowledge, our mātauranga, which has been around for a very, very long time. And so again, it's how we're applying that to this particular issue. So I think that's loosely what we call the research program, or research, but it's not necessarily, I guess, research per se, but it's really around the application and providing a space for the application and use of our mātauranga Māori for this particular issue. It sort of starts to emancipate the mind a little bit, or free the mind from research just looks like this. It doesn't look any different. I think what we're doing here is something that is quite different, and it's more us. I'd like to say that it's more us, and I hope that really encourages people to say, well, actually, maybe there's a role or a place for me and my kaumātua and kuia's knowledge on to help us with this issue. So I think I hope that's a part of how communities might sort of perceive this research process as being, because again, as I said before, I think the research process has been closed to Māori for many, many, many years. Highly debated, or it's a highly topical subject at the moment, and it's been the cause of much debate, i.e. mātauranga and science. And so I think there was a letter to the listener that was published last year, which created a huge debate amongst the research fraternity, both Māori and non-Māori. And so I think it's timely, because I think this is a kaupapa that we need to discuss. We need to get behind our mātauranga. We need to raise its profile, and more importantly, it needs to be considered as a go-to form of knowledge, particularly when dealing with issues and kaupapa here in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Pai ana ki roto te taha kiko, pat kei roto ana o te taha wairua, ne? Ko wā tātou krakia ngā rongo katoa, ne? Kei te inue, ko wā tātou taku, wā tātou waiata, ko ngaro nei ngā kōrero o te ngahere. Ne? Ko ngaro e nā tari au wā tātou whānau ki roto te ngahere, wā tātou ka mea tuke tongotongo e wa kautahu. Ke rongo koutou, ia papa tuanuku e kōrero ana ki a koutou. Ne? I roto no tēnā ka mea tau ki a rātou, ne kore ta tātou taigo e ora, ko kore tātou e ora. E kore tātou mahi ngā rongo e mahi nei, a tātou ko mate katoa wa tātou rākau katoa. I puta te tahi kōrero i ta taku tērā waku rangatira a Kevin Prime. E tāna, mena tāia koe ki te you can save one tree, he mea tēnā. He mea tēnā. Pati timatau ki te mahinga rongo nei runga wa tahi Rakau I roto kei roto Ngāti whātua. Wēnei rāko tatake te mate I te kauri mane, te ngāgarani. Ka timatau, tahi tauhau I mahi I te mea tahe o ngā waku tauira I haere mai te kite au, ki te ino ti au, me pēhā rā tāia ki te hakaora wana kauri, te mate na roto tana ngahere. Ka mea tau, mea ni te pākei te whewa, mea ni te hinu, ka mea tau me pēne, ka mea tau tiki ngā tu ngā kai kāta, miki ngia, ka tukua ki runga tō whenu. Nā ka mahia ka tehi te hinge, nāna I tino mākanga rākau ni. E whitu ngā rākau I mahia. Ngā rākau whitu ne, ko ora katoke. Ko ora katoke wēnei rākau.
Inherently, they know within themselves that their knowledge has a rightful place sitting alongside. The notion of oranga is not just about the code, it's about us as people, and it's about the institutions and organisations that we're part of as well. It's about how we bring a different view, a different way of viewing the world into that space in a way that I think will create oranga and whakamana our own knowledge. Our oranga would be much more improved if both stood side by side as equals.
Tēnā tātou, kei te mihi au ki te oranga whānau. That was an awesome video. We're now going to move on to another pre-recorded presentation from Marcus-Rongowhitiao Shadbolt, who is a descendant of Te Arawa, Ngāti Kahungunu, Ngāti Porou and Ngāi Tahu. He is a master's student at the University of Canterbury working on seed collection and storage. He is also a research and policy analyst for Te Tira Whakamātaki, the Māori Biosecurity Network. His presentation is titled Kaupapa Māori Approaches to Conserving Taonga Seeds.
Tēnā koutou katoa ko Marcus-Rongowhitiao Shadbolt tōku ingoa. Today I will be presenting on my research titled Kaupapa Māori Approaches to Conserving Taonga Seeds. Kei te taha o tōku māma ko Te Arawa, Ngāti Kahungunu, Ngāti Porou, Ngā iwi. Kei te taha o tōku pāpā ko Ngāi Tahu te iwi. We'll start off with the original issue and why we need seed banking. So climate change and the destruction of our ecosystems are not issues that we are going away anytime soon. And I'm sure this is not an issue that I really need to be preaching to you all about, but it is always a good place to start. We're currently undergoing the greatest loss of species and ecosystems in our short history, and the fallout is already showing to be huge. Climate change is almost certain to disrupt food availability, reduce access to food, and affect food quality. Projected increases in temperatures and extreme weather events is likely to result in reduced agricultural productivity. Increasing temperatures can contribute to spoilage and contamination, and with an increase in extreme events and changing landscapes, the ways we deliver and transport food will change as well. These changes will affect food availability and supply at all levels, making it essential for robust methods and systems to be in place for dealing with this. Seed banking provides an opportunity for us to store the seeds for numerous key foods to protect them against the coming effects of climate change, and also the future incursions that will come from this, such as PSA, brown marmorated stink bug, myrtle rust, and many more. Seed banking and collection has also become vital for planting projects. The New Zealand government pledged to plant 1 billion trees by 2028, but where will those seeds come from? What trees are we planting? Where do those seeds or saplings come from? They're all huge issues for the future, and for making sure that our forests last, and ensuring that we plant the right trees in the right places. Seed collection is crucial here again. For every billion trees, we need at least 3 billion seeds. Clearly, seed banking is important then. So how do we do it right? My master's thesis aims to investigate some of the basics of seed behaviour for native species and begin to better understand how we store these species and how we germinate them. The project also aims to look at what best practice for seed banking in Aotearoa looks like from the perspective of Māori, and to ensure that this system is consistent with the aspirations of the Y262 claim. So this project is a joint masters between a number of groups and themes and projects. So it's between the Oranga program, the conservation and restoration theme, and is also linked to the TTW seed program. Through both NRT themes, this project is also linked to iwi and hapu, and through TTW, we are linked to DOC seed program. To break these down again, as I'm sure many of you will know, but I'll go through anyway, Oranga is connected to and focuses on the Māori needs and capacity in the space, while the conservation and restoration theme is more about the technical requirements of seed storage. And TTW is about training our people and getting them what they need to do the work that's important to them. So bringing all those together, this project aims to add to the existing future work of all these work streams and create useful outcomes for other projects. One of these awesome projects that is going on is the Indigenous Seed Bank, currently being designed with TTW to house Aotearoa's Taonga and other important seeds. Much more work will need to be done looking at the behaviour of native species seeds and storage, on top of the awesome work already being done to support endeavours such as this. Seed banks like this will only become more useful in the future, as climate change continues to impact us in extreme ways. Seed banks such as the Millennium Seed Bank in the UK and the Svalbard Seed Vault, halfway between Norway and the North Pole, are awesome programs, with incredible collections and personnel working in them, but they are on the other side of the world. And if we ever wanted to access these during a disaster, it would be near impossible. This distance with the rest of the world is the main reason why it's essential that we have our own major facility in Aotearoa sooner rather than later. Other groups around the world have already reached out to us as well and have helped with resourcing and training. The seed drums that you can see in these photos on the right were donated to us by the Millennium Seed Bank in the UK when myrtle rust first hit, and we were able to distribute them through TTW's networks to communities, along with having trainers coming in from Kew Gardens and other seed banks to teach our ground workers how to use the equipment in these drums and how to collect seeds. So this project is looking to be really awesome, and I am super excited about going into it this year and getting some exciting outcomes. I'm also lucky to have some awesome supervisors and people who are helping me along the way. Thank you to my two awesome supervisors, Sarah Wise and Jason Tilianakis at UC, and to Aroha Mead and Waitangi Wood, who have been helping me with seed collection sites and guidance on the best practice component of this work. I'd also especially like to thank Matua Jim Doherty, who inspired my passion in this area with a project I was lucky enough to do with him a couple of years ago, where we had a designer draw a recreation of the Turuapo forest and filled it with his hapu's original names for the flora of the forest, and during the process learned a whole lot of the underlying meanings behind those names. I just want to thank the organisations for supporting this work and doing other great awesome stuff in that space. So I'll leave it at that. Mā te wā, and thanks for listening.
Kia ora. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Marcus, a fascinating kaupapa. I'd now like to move on to introduce Valance Smith. Dr. Valance Smith is from Ngāpuhi, Waikato, Ngāti Haina and Ngāti Pākehā. He is the Assistant Pro-Vice-Chancellor Māori Advancement at AUT, also a composer, tutor and performer of kapa haka and modern music. His current research includes co-leading a suite of research projects within the National Science Challenge, looking at mātauranga Māori solutions for coded dieback, and another looking at the relationship between maramataka and physical activity and well-being. Valance's presentation is called Te Waiatanga Mai, or Te Atua, Singing the World into Existence. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa te whānau. Tuatahi ake ka mihi ki te reo ngā tō tātou pāpā Joe Hawke noho e takoto mai ngā ki Oranga i tēnei wā, haere oki ai. O tira kia tātou e whakarau ika nei, e hono mai nei ki tēnei wānanga tahi o tātou e mihi ana ki a koutou katoa. Taku pāpā no Ngāpuhi, taku māma no Waikato, ko Valance Smith tōku ingoa. Kia ora te whānau. My presentation is called Singing the World into Existence. E kia nei te kōrero, kei a te pō te timatanga o te waiatanga mai a te atua ko te ao marama, ko te ao tūroa. And this is just going to frame the mahi that we're doing in RA2. In RA2, Jamie referred to earlier in terms of the mahi that himself, Matua Tohe and Jason Cooper are doing with RA1, and so RA2 is the other part of that, which is looking at the role of taku, the role of ihiranga frequencies and vibrations and waiata into the whakaora o te kauri in terms of reversing the decline of our kauri. And we come from a place of Te Ao Māori. When I have a look at the word Māori, words like ma ori ori come out, which are ma, which is pure, and the ori ori is that pure resonance, the resonance of vibrations and frequencies. With ori ori, traditionally and contemporarily as well, are composed and sung to pepi. Ori ori functioned as vibrational sound baths or massages, often instilling whakapapa, kōrero tuku iho, tohu tohu, in terms of things to do, things what not to do, in terms of also our connections and reaffirming our connections to Te Taiao, as Dan referred to earlier in his presentation. So the pure resonance of the ori ori, the resonance of frequencies and vibrations, orient, align, and unfurl in harmony our connection with Te Taiao and the natural flow and order of all things. And so that is Te Ao Māori, Ma Ori Ori Māori. And from this, we have Kaupapa Māori research. So just to reaffirm again what Marcus has referred to in terms of the mahi that we're doing, Kaupapa Māori includes Te Ao Māori philosophies, our ways of expressing our thoughts, beings, and these things also include things like waiata, karakia, and mihi mihi, and whakatauki, and how we greet and how we pay tribute to all these different things and express and retell and transmit knowledge through our way of doing, or through a Māori way of doing things. What I'm going to introduce now, whānau, is the Kaupapa Māori also gives us the freedom to whatu, or to weave in other knowledges, so long as it's governed by Māori and also used in a Māori way. And so what we is practice-led research, and practice-led research is concerned with the nature of practice, and that leads to new knowledge and has operational significance for that practice. By a practice-led inquiry, we refer to a process of thinking through immersion within conceptual and material development. So it is artistic practice that leads the research through its ability to raise questions and discoveries that shape refined versions of an artistic artifact. The artistic artifact that we're referring to is waiata and singing and taku and karakia. The next part of this is artistic inquiry. So co-jointly, this research may also be conceived as an artistic inquiry. Describes such a research paradigm as an orientation where the researcher applies artistic methods to research that surfaces through multiple facets, including the composition of artistic knowledge. So again, referring to the significance of taku, the composition of taku and karakia, and the composition of waiata to be able to transmit our knowledge. Artistic inquiry is embodied knowledge. The knowledge that and the knowledge that artistic research strives for is a felt knowledge. And this brings us to this idea of wānanga. So again, Kaupapa Māori allows us to bring in all these different ways of knowing, and I look at artistic inquiry and practice-led research as basically just a wānanga. Te wā kangana, the time where we actually look at a kaupapa this wide and just drill down deep, 3 miles deep. And that's what wānanga is, having whakawhiti kōrero or discussion, noho titiro whakarongo, to sit down, to observe, to listen, but also to contribute to the discussion as well. And that's what essentially what wānanga is. And from part of these wānanga, as Dan has already talked about, is the pūrākau between the tohora and the kauri. The title of this presentation is called Singing the World into Existence, and this comes from a kōrero tuku iho from Matiaha Tira Mōrehu no Kaitahu, and e kia nei te kōrero kei a te pō te timatanga o te waia te tanga mea te atua, ko te ao marama, ko te ao tūroa. It was the gods that sang the world into existence. Ka pai? The gods that sang the world into existence. This brings us into the singing part, into ihi rangaranga. Matua tohe he's got a huge kōrero on ihi rangaranga, and we're really fortunate to be able to learn from Matua Tohe and also other kaumātua in terms of the role of ihi rangaranga, in terms of connecting ourselves to te taiao. Ihi rangaranga are the frequencies and vibrations of the ancient spiritual language of te reo Māori, and represent a musical form that emanates from and expresses the pulse of the sacred origins of the peoples and the land. Matua tohe refers to ihi rangaranga as such are the frequencies and vibrations when we engage in te reo Māori. Each vowel gives off a particular vibration that links us the divine energy that resides within us. When we are in that space, it is uplifting. When we hear tau parapara, karakia, waiata, it uplifts. It uplifts that ihi rangaranga that is in that space, communicating this energy that is in te reo when it's released into ihi rangaranga, into the cosmos. So ihi rangaranga can be transferred through the performance or the recital or of waiata, the singing of waiata, karaki and takutaku and so on, but also through taonga pūoro. So recently, a couple of weeks ago, we were again fortunate enough to be with Matua Tohe and Jason Cooper and the whānau from Mangamuka, and taonga pūoro were a big part of the kōrero regarding connecting to the kauri, connecting to the ngahere, te taiao, through the use of taonga pūoro and through the use of waiata and takutaku. And how we do that is we identify and we use the ihi rangaranga. So when we talk about singing the world into existence and going back to kaya te pō, te timatanga o te waitatanga mai a te atua, we also have those things, those domains within ngā atua Māori. Within the domain of rangi nui, as an example, we have the putorino. And when we were at our wānanga with Matua Tohe and the whānau from Mangamuka, the putorino, the kōauau and the nguru featured, played a huge role in terms of making that connection with the ihi rangaranga through the playing of those different instruments. Another atua Māori tangaroa, the pūtātara, was also blown a lot from when we went out to visit other parts of our atua, from Papatuanuku are the pākuru and the poi. Maybe some of us might have heard the pūrere or the porotiti, and that's also another expression of tāwhiri mātia, or representation of tāwhiri mātia within taonga pūoro. So just also that is also talking to that kōrero of kaya te pō, te timatanga o te waitatanga mai a te atua, ko te ao marama, ko te ao tūroa. And the mahi that we're doing in RA2 is essentially using our wānanga with artistic inquiry, with practice-led research. Basically, with that, it requires us to be to self-reflect, to take journals, to basically bring together all of our experiences, personal experiences of the wānanga, and from those experiences, we start to identify different parts of our research. And part of our research is to identify different kupu that are specific to the ngahere, with a specific focus on the kauri. So we are going to be putting those kupu, or categorizing those kupu, by whakapapa. And this is a suggestion, and that was given to us by Papa Ririata Makiha. Another thing that Matua Tohe also talks about is whakapono intent, having the right intent. The frequencies, you might not be able to necessarily hear them, but they are felt in terms of intent and whakapono. And so it's important that we clear our minds, and that we can actually unhear what we would normally hear in our normal everyday lives, and just go into the forest and just listen to ngā tangi, to the sounds of the forest. That will also enable us to more effectively give taku and give karakia. So that's also part of our wānanga, is to identify those different taku and those different karakia, specifically to te whakaoro o te kauri, to bring life into or enhance the mauri of the kauri. A part of our mahi also is to hopuoro, which is to basically to record the soundscapes of these different forests that are ridden with the ngarara, and forests that aren't. So what we might be calling a healthy forest. So we have got Marie Sheehan, who's a part of our team also, who is a sound ecologist, and she's got all her fancy equipment, hydro mics, geo mics, shotgun mics, all these other different microphones. We're actually starting to record the soundscapes of these different forests. And when we record that is going to be determined on the maramataka. So we next month we are going to be attending several maramataka wānanga with Papa Reriata and Ruben Taipari, and I believe Matua Tohe, you'll be attending some of those as well as other tohunga. So in terms of when we will be taking these recordings will be determined by the maramataka. And what we also want to achieve from these experiences as well is to tito waiata. And we want to also compose these songs because, as we know, waiata are a way of storytelling. And so we also want to entertain the communities of which have gifted us a lot of this knowledge. So we should give back to the communities in ways that that they appreciate, that rewards them, that rewards the kaupapa. And so one way of doing that is by composing a waiata. So at our last wānanga with Papa Reriata, and then coming into our wānanga with Matua Tohe, we composed the waiata just to express and represent the wānanga that we had with that whānau for the 4 days. And of course, the cycle goes around, so everything's informed by Te Ao Māori, Kaupapa Māori, and so on. And I've got that little wānanga going round and round because we have got wānanga. We have got wānanga for June and July. So basically, we're going to be wānanga hopping and doing a lot of artistic inquiry and practice-led research, and basically bringing together a lot of stories so we can kupu, identify the kupu by whakapapa, taku karakia, take the soundscapes, or rather capture the soundscapes, tito waiata, which will therefore enable us and platform us to be able to share back our mahi through storytelling, through waiata, and through kōrero tuku iho. And just sharing one last slide, this is our wānanga that we had up at Whakarongotai Marae, up in Nopononi, with Papa Reriata. And you'll see we have some of our rangatahi in the top right hand corner there, and so we're just sharing with them some of the equipment that we use or that Marie uses and our team uses, and we've also been able to teach them how to use it, and also a part of this process in terms of utu, which is a reciprocal relationship. We've also found budget to be able to provide the rangatahi groups which work with Papa Reriata, and they're called Te Atarongo, with this really critical equipment to achieve some of their mahi with the tai out, with the ngahere, but also some of the other mahi that Papa Reriata is doing with the repo and so on. Hoi no rea te whānau, ka mutu te pahu ki kona, mihi ana ki tēnā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, thanks so much for that, Valance. Another fascinating presentation. We're now moving into the Q&A, and joining us is Marcus, Tohi, Matua Tohi, and Jamie. Kia ora, everyone. So the chat has been going. There is the live Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, so I encourage you to submit some questions there, and I'll just start going through those now. We've got one from Desi asking, what is the role of tauiwi in supporting the Māori worldview and implementation of knowledge, be it spectator, supporter, or participator?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Oh, yeah. So the question was, what is the role of tauiwi in supporting the Māori worldview and implementation of knowledge?
Kia ora whānau, I might just start and kick it off.
What is my role in regards to the worldview?
The role of tauiwi.
Oh, right. I think one of the roles that we have is actually trying to find a place for them in what we call Te Ao Māori. In our worldview, it's totally different to their worldview. And if they can be able to recognize how we see things, I think then they'll get a better understanding. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, Matua. Sort of a similar question, I think here from Becky, who says fantastic talk, by the way. In regards to challenging our own personal worldviews, is there something in particular you'd challenge us to do? So I think that might be from a non-Māori perspective, that question.
I think, well, I'll take it.
I think it goes back to the same question I answered before, that there need to be a place where they can come together and gain that understanding. Yeah.
But I think that, and also if I might add,
Because there's a total difference in how they see things and how we see things. If we go back to what we call pūrākau are stories that is being handed down. People call them fiction. We call it fact. Because we call it actual true stories that have been handed down through the generations. But people will look at it as fairy tales. And so those are the things that we call as our worldview.
Did you have something to add there, Jamie?
Yeah, no, I think Dan really laid a nice framework for this particular question, and Matuatoe has just talked about worldviews, and I think Dan talked about the pervasive nature of people's worldviews, and I think in terms of something that I think non-Māori could in terms of coming alongside this sort of is actually challenging their own will, how they see things, how they perceive things. I think, as Matuatoe said, people coming from different perspectives, different worldviews, and I think if you are able to, put yourself in a position where you are questioning your own worldview, I think that's really helpful in terms of being able to support, I guess, a lot of the work that this particular mahi is, this particular oranga theme is doing. And in terms of supporting the Māori work that's coming through. So I think, some of the stuff, and again, you saw with Valance and a real practical example of what is going on, and completely different interpretations and from a different perspective, but still a research project in its own right. So again, I think that might be challenging to some people. So I guess you have to able to again, to just challenge your own real view. I think that's a good start.
Awesome, kia ora. Got a question here for Marcus. Claire is wondering if the Margot Ford Germplasm Centre might be involved in some capacity with the seed banking work that you're doing.
I'm not aware at the moment if the Margot Ford Germplasm Centre is involved in any of our programs. We have been reaching out to a number of other seed banking organisations. We've recently been in touch with some other groups as well who are looking to get into it, like Waikato have reached out to us, and a number of other Northland and Bay of Plenty iwi have also talked to us about a number of these things. I've recently been in touch with the Botanic Gardens, in Christchurch specifically, and hopefully some of the further ones. Yeah, I guess we are looking at as many different seed banking groups as we possibly can, but obviously it'll take some time to work around them all. But we're certainly open to working with other facilities as long as they share our aspirations and mission. Yeah, kia ora. Hope that answers your question.
Awesome. And just furthermore on your mahi with seed storage, I was really interested to hear more personally about the Indigenous seed bank that you mentioned. Could you just speak a little bit more about that for our audience?
So the Indigenous Seed Bank is currently one of TTW's main goals. We're looking to build a all-encompassing seed facility somewhere in the country that can be used as a main storage base by Indigenous peoples throughout New Zealand, but also with the potential for that to go into the wider Pacific as well, and create a centre that is able to adequately and appropriately collect and store seeds in line with the values and aspirations and desires of the communities storing them. We're also looking at using what we call a hub and spoke model. So the idea is that we have our main central seed banking hub with a number of small facilities all around the country or Pacific if it extends that far, to also allow communities to have as much control and as much connection to those seeds that are being stored. We've been working with Maniapoto quite closely in that and are looking to sort of kick that spoke model off with him and get a smaller seed facility there sometime in the near future, even before we do eventually build a full facility. Yeah.
Awesome. Got a question here for Valance from Daniel, and I'm sure there'll be other people wondering this as well. Your kaupapa is fascinating, and Daniel's wondering if there is comparable work being done internationally, whether traditional knowledge or practices or more contemporary knowledges for the soundscapes and the natural environment is being worked on.
Kia ora, Daniel. Yes, there. Particular note there. There's been research with regarding actually taking the soundscapes from coral reefs. The findings from that was actually taking the sounds of coral reefs that have got a healthy soundscape, and then putting in some hydro speakers in a coral reef that has unhealthy sounds. Well, is unhealthy, playing those sounds in those areas, and then all of those different organisms coming back to that particular reef and just regenerate. It's just in coral reefs. There's also a lot of work done, some work done over in Canada regarding some soundscapes with some of the native trees over there. So there is a lot of work internationally being done in terms of the Indigenous lens across that. Not too sure at this stage.
Awesome. And we've got another question for you, Valance. Do you think there is space for incorporating ihirangaranga into field practices for Māori and tauiwi?
I suppose ihirangaranga is a entity that exists. So I'm going to use this example that Maniapoto gave us. And this is how we actually ended up with the word kōriora. So there was a time when Maniapoto, Matua Hemi Waiwai and Matua Kevin Prime went into Waipaua, did a karakia at night and did a karakia in the morning. On their way out of the forest, they were asked to clean their shoes as we normally would, but that was the whole idea and intent of the karakia. So the person that was asked the kaumātua to clean their shoes was non-Māori from Doc. However, right up until that moment, that person was actually a part of the process. So in that way, there is room and space for non-Māori to be a part of ihirangaranga, indeed anything within the kōrero tuku iho te ao Māori space, so long as there is whakapono. And if non-Māori have whakapono in what we're doing, then absolutely, the moment the whakapono is lost is the moment there is no space.
Awesome. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our Q&A session. Yeah, big mihi to all of you for your work and very thoughtful responses to those questions, and thank you for asking questions to our audience. I'll now hand it back to our MC, Andrea, to wrap up the session.
Oh, kia ora anō koutou. I'd just like to wrap up the session on the Oranga theme with a ngā mihi nui to all of our speakers today. There's been some fantastic work presented. Please take the time to engage with Marcus, Jamie, Valance, Maniapoto, and also to thank Dan earlier from his video. If we could give a round of applause, we would. Please return to the main program timeline. Join us in the networking session. We're going to get ready for the next part of the session, which starts in 8 minutes' time on mobilising for action. Kia ora.